We are live, ladies and gents. We made it. This might be the first podcast that went live with no hiccups and hangups in the beginning, which means I just jinxed it.
Yeah.
So over the next hour, we're about to see some crazy things go down. So God only knows what's going to happen. Welcome y'all to Real People, Real Talk. I am your host, Salo Ortiz, licensed clinical social worker here at Meridian Psychotherapy. We just got a new sign and I was excited to show it off because recovery starts here, y'all. We are excited to bring you Real People, Real Talk. This is a platform where we speak on real mental health and substance use issues and needs of the community. Not just here locally, primarily locally, but nationally, internationally. What are the real mental health substance use needs that are addressed or that are needing to be addressed, not just in one-on-one therapy? And so tonight's topic is really, really key, really, really important. We're talking about first responders, and we're talking about many of the barriers, many of the needs that first responders have with mental health and substance use issues, needs, treatment, follow-up, all of that sort of stuff. And so I am not a first responder, even though, is it bad that I try to act like I am? Like,
It's very bad.
Yeah,
I mean, even if I work in mental health,
It's not the same.
yo, how come mental health don't get no love? All right, we'll talk about that another time.
And we answered that at the exact same
Yeah,
time.
that's pretty sad. That's bad. Well, it's even worse because you are a mental health therapist and a first responder. So you're like, no, that's bad. Like, I don't ever try to front. So that's enough about me. I want my guests to introduce themselves, and then here's how it goes down. We talk for the next hour and a half because that's the time we allotted. If it goes shorter, but we'll talk about the needs. And hopefully those who are watching and will tune in will send in questions. We'll come up with questions, and we'll just see where the conversation goes. All right. I want to have you introduce yourself. So, ladies first, can I be a gentleman?
Go for it.
Okay.
Tell them who you are, what you do with both hats, I guess, and in real life, like all of life.
Okay. I'm Debbie Jones. I work here at Meridian as a mental health professional psychotherapist, licensed clinical social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also a full-time firefighter for a local fire department in the area.
How long?
For 23 years, 22 years and some change. Volunteer-wise, that puts me probably around 27 years. I volunteered before working career. So
All of that in Virginia Beach.
yes, no, take that back. Suffolk, I volunteered, and then a career here in Virginia Beach. So
That's
it's been
crazy.
exciting. I love every minute of it. And
Yeah, that's
so
crazy.
one day I woke up and I have always had a love for advocacy for mental health. And I said, why am I not working with the mentally ill? So
And then got in touch with me, as the
Yeah,
story kind of
right.
goes, and said, for the next few years, I'm going to attach myself to this crazy man and learn how to do
Right.
mental health, right?
So went back, got my graduate degree and became LCSW and decided to focus on first responders.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the only population I work with.
Mhm.
I do some adolescents, but
Yeah.
mainly first responders and adults
Well, you do trauma work,
and grief.
You know
Yes. Yeah.
so you do a lot mental health wise.
Yeah. I am very blessed that it all worked out the way it did. I believe this
Yeah.
is what I'm supposed to be.
Yo, I'm going to have to tell y'all one day that it almost never happened because she never turned her paperwork in. But we'll talk about that
We'll
another
talk about
time.
that some other time. I was a little bit scared.
Just a little bit.
Wasn't
just a little bit.
sure.
Yo, I'm so glad that you did it though, because real talk, like nobody could do it with that perspective and as effectively as you do.
Oh,
So
thank you.
that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I'm very lucky to be here. So
I'm lucky you're on the squad. So
Yeah.
thank you. And thanks for joining us tonight. Who are you? Why are you here?
I feel like it's awkward. I'm looking at you. The
I
camera
know.
for us, but
Should I
anyway,
like
yes. Good evening, everyone. My name's Ben Curran. A little bit about me. I come from a law enforcement background. I was a police officer in this area of the state for about 7 years. And I had the opportunity to work in various capacities, narcotics, temporarily as a detective, as well as other patrol training, where I trained young officers just how to manage, how to survive in the street, basically street survival. I did that for about 7 years, and I decided to venture on after kind of working long hours and different shift work. I decided I kind of wanted to have a family. I kind of wanted to settle down. I felt like it was getting kind of old, kind of doing the same things. It was just kind of toilsome. So what I did was I took a job. I work for an insurance company now, and I investigate insurance fraud. So
Did you always start right away into insurance fraud, or did you like have to go door to door selling insurance and then go into that?
No, I went immediately in. Kind of what I did was I just got a stack of resumes. I went to that company. I just kind of said, hey, I'm here. This is what I want to do. What do I have to do to get in here? So that's kind of where I'm at.
And that had to be I'm assuming semi smooth shift from what you were doing investigatively here to doing the stuff that you're doing now,
It was a
right?
pretty easy transition. I think the biggest thing for me was going from a law enforcement background right away to the corporate world, which is a completely different animal. How you communicate, how you talk.
Oh, yeah. Humor does not translate.
Humor is very different, very different.
You're like, dude, that was funny, right?
No, I think firefighters and police, we have this in common. You can kind of say what's on your mind. And in the corporate world, you got to learn how to craft, and I use the word craft, emails where you don't come across.
Right. Even here at Meridian, I've learned very quickly the front staff doesn't always appreciate my.
Look, you just got to learn how to work with the right types.
They're awesome though.
Yeah, it's just, but it is a scary transition because oftentimes, and again, I am not a first responder, but the thought is, well, the only thing I can do is security or loss prevention or that sort of thing. Like the mindset shift has to be, I mean, it's just different. Like you have to shift, and you can do more than just those limited jobs. You just have to be willing to kind of step out. You got to step out.
Right, but I think the key is it's easy to say that, but getting your mind, especially part of your brain that controls our hypervigilance and our worry and our trauma and so forth, getting that caught up to recognize that we're no longer the 911 moment.
Yeah. Which is literally 24/7, like 911 moment, because you're waiting for it if it's not coming, if it's not there already. I gotta tell y'all, I gotta show y'all this. So in the corner is Rosa snoring.
It's not
flat out snoring. Like you can tell what she thinks of us.
Rosa.
So if you hear some like rumbling in the background, it's not an earthquake. It's Rosa literally snoring. I know you got your eyes open. That's our therapy dog here in house. We've got two, and she clearly has had a long day because she's worked harder than any of us. So go figure, do your thing, Rosa. So listen, y'all, send in some questions and type in. We'll be checking the chat here, the live chat, I think, as I close this to see what's going on. But I pray that you guys can send in questions, real comments. We may not have all the answers, but let's talk. I want this to be a real platform. So I'll be looking at my phone every now and then, and I'll be checking out some things, but I want us to have a conversation. My first question, none of this is scripted. So my first question is this necessary? Is it necessary to have this conversation? Because we're talking first responders. We're not talking military, even though we sometimes get them interchangeable in the community. We're talking police, fire, rescue, right? Why do we have to have this conversation? To even address mental health, substance use needs, you're real people. You're doing real things. Why are we even sitting down, spending specific intentional time talking about a first responder community? Why is this a problem? Why is this an issue?
Oh, so I was just gonna say, so when you are the person that people call to fix something, you get used to being in that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't think that there's no one else to call.
No.
And so when we're the ones that people call to save the day, save their loved ones, put the fire out, get the bad guy, whatever, we tend to forget that there's other people that we can rely on.
Yeah.
And so we're always on the 911 call.
Yeah.
So if we have to ask for help, sometimes that makes us look weak. So we become our own judge, jury, and executioner in our mind. And that's a very dangerous place to be.
So and it's similar to what they say mental health wise, because they're like, hey, I tell people often that every therapist needs a therapist. Yes. Like if your therapist don't have a therapist, they ain't doing something right. But it's the same idea with first responder work, because you would think that they would say, well, I'm the first one that's going to have to need to find help or find somebody to talk to. But we will often put ourselves aside. You will put yourselves aside for the sake of the work or the help or the whatever, knowing that you need it, right?
Yeah, and I think you nailed it how you described that. But I think one thing I always think about is you're putting everybody's problems on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to call the police because they're having a good day.
Right.
They're experiencing something traumatic, something bad has happened. They're hurt, they're emotionally hurt, or they're physically hurt, or they experience something terrible. Mm-hmm. And I think you're used to constantly just putting it on your back, and you have nowhere to dispose of it. Yeah. And I see, I see a lot of different, like you experience I read something even this morning. I'll speak specifically for police. Police every 6 months experiences about 3 traumatic experiences.
On the job or in life?
On the job. And I don't have I would quote exactly what article I got that from, and I apologize. I can give that to Sal if need be, if somebody's interested in it. Somebody's checking me out.
Yeah, that's right. We need.
I know you're out there.
This is like part of the interruption. Like we need somebody checking the story in the facts.
Right. But it's just something to think about because the regular person does not experience that.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways we were trained that, how can I put it? We're constantly thinking about the problems around us.
Mm-hmm.
And the regular person is maybe, they're going through their job. They're going to go home and watch their TV show. They're planning out their weekend, their golf trip, whatever the case is. Right. And a lot of us, as we were talking before the recording, a lot of us aren't used to having a weekend. We're not used to having the grill out or the opportunity to spend time with family. And it kind of develops this weird, jaded sense of responsibility, but also a desire to kind of express that with somebody, but yet you're just kind of trained that this is what we're called to do.
Right. Well, so in a lot of lines of experience, lines of work, you're taught you're told to like turn it on and off, right? People talk about that with our work, even as therapists, right? Do you turn it on and off, so to speak, quote unquote? I would guess that it's hard for you to quote unquote turn it on or turn it off because you have to stay on even when you're off because at any moment something could be on. Is that accurate? Is that a fair stuff? Because I'm not in that community.
Well, perfect example. So I went with my family, extended family, to North Carolina to the beach, having a beautiful time, sitting on the beach, just relaxing, and there's a kid drowning. Mm-hmm. So I throw my glasses in my sister's lap, and I watch, and I saw right back, and she said, "You just became somebody else. Next thing I know, you're in the water swimming, and you get the kid and bring them up, and they're okay." The mom, of course, is like minimizing everything, and everyone's like, going, "That's great, Deb," and I'm like, I'll be in the house. Like I was done. I didn't want to do that. It's not. I wanted just to go.
Because off means really wanting to disconnect and be off for a minute. Like God forbid you get a taste of what the rest of America or the rest of society gets to face is off and being down, right?
And if I wasn't a first responder, maybe I wouldn't have understood the sounds I was hearing from the child and really looked and to see, gosh, they were really having problems.
Well, it's funny, Debbie, though, because you were off, right? You were chilling, right? Catching the sun. And it's not like you were intentionally looking for somebody to drown. Right. You weren't the lifeguard. So it's like, even when you try to be off, you're still always on alert. Right. Yeah. Right?
And there's no lifeguards down where we were. So that was a little bit, and then we have younger kids in our family, but they weren't they were not in the water because normally I'm in there with them if they are. So I was, that moment was just for me and my sister.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can think of one example off the cuff is I was on vacation. I was in another state and we walked into a restaurant, bar area, lounge area. And, I was in there to have a good time, relax. Out of nowhere, a guy started swinging at a bouncer and they got into a scuffle and I didn't even think about it. And I had the guy with his hands behind his back and was helping him out. And it was just a split-second reaction where I didn't even have a chance. You're immediately going into a room, you're analyzing everything.
Right.
I go, even in the parking lot, pulling in here. My wife makes fun of me, but I still memorize tags. And this is, I've been out of law enforcement now for 11 years. Wow. And I still will drive and see if somebody's registration is current. I look at inspection stickers.
So when you're zoning out, your wife is like, leave the registration alone. I know it's expired.
No, but that's the kind of mentality.
Right.
We went to a drive-in movie. This was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And I struggled because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we're in the dark. We have all these strangers around us. I don't know where their hands are. I don't know if they're reaching for a weapon. Yeah. This is a dangerous situation. Yeah. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, are we good? Is something going to happen? So it's just constant. And I think it's one of those things where it never leaves you because you're trained that way and you're constantly taught to think that way.
Well, Ben, now here's the other part that's troubling for me, right? This is why I like this conversation because I'm not one of you. And so I get to hear it and give you the honest response from somebody who's on the outside looking in. You've normalized an unhealthy feeling, an unhealthy reaction, you've normalized all these things, like the quivering in your stomach, the fact that you can never finish a meal, or that you eat so fast, or that you sleep with one eye, right? You've normalized these unhealthy behaviors and have accepted them as normal, and which is not healthy, Debbie, for a therapist. Like if we're talking to a client, we're like, dude, that's not okay, right? But in your community, you've normalized this to the point that it's okay all the time, right? You shouldn't be anxious, like shortness of breath, and your chest is tight, right? And you're just tense, right? Your daughters want to play, and you're like, right, Daddy, why are you so tense? Just playing, like we've normalized unhealthy behaviors, and we've taken that to be okay. Why has a community that is bent on making sure everybody's safe and okay known that this is not healthy? We're not okay because we're dying sooner. You're dying sooner. You're getting hurt sooner, right? The medical conditions and everything else, the substance use.
Yeah, really, and I don't have any specific research on this, but generally, when firefighters, and I especially don't have that on police, but when firefighters retire, I mean, they have maybe 30 years, if that, of retirement. And some people have less than that, especially with our cancer rates and so forth.
Let alone the substance use rate.
Right.
I mean, on the job, let alone after the fact. And trying, because Ben, you and I've talked, and you've talked openly about being away from the work now for a few years, but and you don't struggle substance-wise, but you recognize how hard it is to push out certain things that were part of that life before. Right? It's how many people struggle to push it out of their head, out of their lives, to try to quote unquote be normal. Right? I mean, the substance rate is insane.
Right, and even when I see first responders, I give them a evidence-based, I guess, survey of how much alcohol they're drinking. And when they add it up and it's 30 beers or 30 drinks a week, they say, well, that's just what we do.
Right.
And so I go, true, that is what maybe we do, but
right.
Is that healthy? They're like, well, I'm not blacking out. They list the things that
the reasons why it's okay.
Why it's okay. And then when I ask them to, well, just think about it, do some research. Think, maybe you want to, maybe if you're drinking 30, maybe drink 28 instead.
Right. The harm reduction. What we call it in our world is harm reduction, right? The reducing the damage, reducing the harm that it can cause.
And if it's a coping skill that is keeping someone safe, even though it's unhealthy, I'm not going to take that coping skill away from that person. Maybe slowly, reduce it from 30 to 25, or maybe you only drink when you're outside, not inside. And more times than not, they go, I do feel better. I'm sleeping better.
What a surprise. Now, is it mainly alcohol? I mean, I could pick on tobacco, right? Nicotine, I could pick on, but are we mainly talking alcohol use? Because there's a sense that I get that we want to forget, or we want to disconnect, or just remove. So, but is it just alcohol or other obviously other substances too, but is that the main one that are wrestling with in first responder communities?
I'd say yes, but I think even a lot of people won't think about it, but caffeine. I mean, today, just to make it out here today, it's a lot of, you're just constantly, you're working crazy hours, you're called in, and you're expected to be alert and awake, and you're thinking about your brothers and sisters as well. You want to keep them safe, so you want to be there alert and awake. Right. So you tend to use that. I used to be into dipping tobacco. And honestly, I got into it. It was a bad habit just to stay awake. And it was really just something that on midnight shift, something you pop it in, it kind of helps the time go by. And, after a couple of years, when my first daughter was born, I was like, I'm done with this stuff. And I threw it out. But it's one of those things where it's a way of, kind of passing the time, but also kind of in a way to just stay awake.
So here's a funny thing, man. I want to point out to y'all. This is how you know we're live. Because I've done this with clients before as we're talking about certain patterns of use and stuff. Ben, without noticing it, just started grabbing his lip.
I noticed that too.
As soon as he started talking about it, because God forbid he opened it up and put it in, right? But we fall back into these patterns, and like our brain, it's like riding a bicycle, right? Like your body falls back into this routine of whatever it is. And so if it's the norm to pop 30 back, to dip, to take this powder or whatever, right? Like that's what we fall back into, and we take that as the norm. This is just what we do.
Right, and even in the neural pathways of our brain, we see certain things, just like Pavlov's dogs,
Mhm.
you know, something happens, the bell
Mhm.
rings and
Mhm.
you want candy, let's say.
Mhm.
And so if you do that enough, the neural pathway is going to be very bright,
Right.
that connection.
Right.
But if you change it up just once, instead of going and get candy, maybe you go buy a new shirt,
Mhm.
that strong connection dims and there's a really faded, small new connection that's created somewhere else. If you do that enough,
Right.
then that connection
Right.
from feeling
Yep.
to candy is reduced,
Yep.
and then the other one is significantly increased. But I will tell you that even that really dull, dim connection of
Mhm.
behavior to candy,
Mhm.
it always is there. So
Yeah.
it's so easy to go back.
Right back into it.
Right.
Well, what I say in therapy and what I train clinicians on is what you feed grows, right? From your belly to your plants to whatever. But you have to approach it with intent.
Mhm.
You have to be conscious and intentional about some of the behaviors, some of the things we're doing. Where we look at use or we look at, ignoring our health as second nature, we have to be intentional about the self-care, about the community care, about the actions we take at all times, because what you feed grows and it can easily be fed without even paying attention to it.
Right.
How did you guys personally, or even, I don't know if it's a wrestle, this is the life part, right? But how did you avoid sliding into the substance pattern of coping with any substances? Like you said, Ben, from dipping to everything, because I'm sure you didn't only dip on the job, right? Like, how did you pull yourself out of that circle, or how did you avoid not falling further into it? Because you see and you do some things that are pretty hardcore, and that's where you go to cope. How did you avoid? What can somebody do? How do you avoid that?
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
I wish I had an answer. We
Yeah.
had this we had a company come in to my jurisdiction, and we kind of laughed about it. We had a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and all of us went in there, and it turned into be just us laughing the whole time. They were telling, "Hey, you guys need to sleep better.
Okay.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
guys need
Check.
to exercise better."
Okay.
And
You got to eat better.
and we were just kind of laughing. I'm like, okay, well, we work all the time, and we see the stuff that we see. I'd say the best thing for me was getting plugged into the church I was going to, and reaching out to. I know the firefighters kind of go through the same thing, but with law enforcement, it kind of turns into you trust only your brothers and sisters.
Your own.
Right.
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 And when you're off, it's all consuming because that's who you want to hang out with because they're the
You don't
only
want to
people
get away
you
from
relate
it. Like, some people are like, yo, I do this all day. I don't want to be around it. But you want to stick together.
I eventually was able to make, like I said, friendships outside of it.
Yeah.
But it became just a brotherhood. Like, hey, we're done. Let's go grab a beer. Let's go hang out. Let's go do
Right.
something. And it turned into just, you almost develop some of these friendships that honestly, I spent so much time in a police car with certain guys that
Mhm.
honestly, maybe if we weren't police officers, we would never be friends.
Right.
But they're such a brother to me
Right.
that I knew some of their stuff better than I
Right.
know my wife.
And you've
Because-
seen some of those things together that you experienced that bonded you.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you have that bond with each other and it kind of it's kind of hard to explain, but
Yep.
you relate to each other.
Yep.
And in law enforcement, you feel you're a target all the time.
Yeah.
You're a target. You're always, you got to make a split second decision and you have very little information sometimes. And
Scary. I can
it's a
imagine.
scary thought.
Yeah.
And I can tell you so many times of coming close to pulling a trigger and thinking like, all right, you're thinking through the different
Mhm.
scenarios. Am I
Mhm.
processing this right? And you're thinking about at the same time,
Mhm.
I'm tired. I didn't sleep well the night before.
Mhm.
I got an argument with my wife before I left. I got
Yeah.
that stuff on my head,
Yeah.
in my head. So it's just kind of a lot of different things that play in there. But for me, it was just getting out,
Mhm.
making some relationships and friendships outside of that,
Mhm.
and not still being with my community. Don't get me wrong,
Right.
but being able to share that, being able to just have
Right.
that relationship, take my head off of those, or take my head out of that environment, and just kind of be able to focus and just kind of see like, man, there's more, there's life outside of what I'm doing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
'Cause
Well,
it's-
that's what's beautiful about her, because she moved from still being active in the fire department, but seeing that there was something else outside of that I had to do, even if it fed back into that community, like you said, staying connected. But I had to force myself to do something outside of this,
Mhm.
right? Like, and that again, it's intentional work. You have to be intentional to know that there's something more to add to it, or something more to be had?
Mhm.
Yes.
Well, the first responders I work with, one of the goals that I use with everyone is they must have a friend that's not a first responder.
Mm.
They've got to see that there's something other than this,
Mm.
because it's too easy to feed each other.
Right.
And you think you're being healthy, but you're not.
Right.
And for me, not going down the road of substance use, I think it was, extended family. There's
Mm.
alcoholism in my family,
Mm.
so I was just scared about that.
Mm.
And so I purposely don't drink a lot, but what's a lot,
Right.
and I don't gamble on purpose.
Right.
That's just stuff that I just choose
Right.
not to do. That's a slippery slope. Doesn't
Right.
mean I'm better than anybody.
No.
It just is what I do. Now,
Yeah.
I drink way too much caffeine.
Mhm.
I probably don't always have a great relationship with food. So everyone's got their thing.
Right. But what I want folks to hear, especially first responders, when they watch this, is to see their own speaking on it. And we learn from each other, right? And we learn from our own, and we learn, okay, Ben could do that. Okay, I see some of myself in them. I can do that. We know this in the therapy world too. When we take on clients, our clients want to see themselves in us, so to speak. And so we just talk about real life. And I want them to hear from you some of the coping strategies you've used that have helped. Not because you're perfect or you're better, not because you overcame something somebody else can't, but because there is a sort of sense of interdependence that says, look, they did it, I can do this, right? In therapy, we talk a lot about, especially doing trauma work, trauma bonds and codependency, which is two things that jumped out, Ben, when you were talking, and Debbie, I know you know this, but the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the bond that exists is based oftentimes on trauma. So trauma bonds are scary. Trauma bonds, are those connections that we make because of a crazy, crappy situation that have made us almost even more tied together. And there's almost stronger than even love bonds or any of the other types of bonding that we see. Trauma bonds it's like weeds in your garden. Like, they do not go away. They're strong.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where some of the bonds that you see come up, not because they're not authentic relationships,
Right.
but they're based on trauma. So then you also see a codependency, right? Co-together, dependent. And so we're interdependent. We lean on each other. We get each other so we can carry each other, and we can tell each other, and we have to hear from each other. But it's almost this weaving in of just this unhealthy pattern, because if one goes down, we both go down. If one goes up, we all go up.
Right.
Right. And I'm sure you see that more in your communities than most average people do, right? Because you see 3 traumas every 6 months, right? So the bonding is crazy, right? Or are there more, would you argue and say that those relationships are more genuine than some of the outside ones?
Well, I think from the law enforcement perspective, you're trusting that they're protecting you too. They got your back. If I'm on the side of the road, I'm depending on them to protect me. They're coming to me for rescue. So it's kind of that, it's just hard to explain for those that are listening that are law enforcement. I mean, you get it. It's just something you develop, and you just know you can trust them.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of, like you said, the trauma stuff. There's stuff you both have been through it. Might talk to somebody, a friend outside, and they did not. They
Right.
probably,
Or even a spouse or family member, because again, we don't do this. Man, me and you go back like peanut butter and jelly. Like, we go back. Deb, we've been connected. But I'm an outsider. No matter how much I get the therapy or the mental health part, I'm still not there. I wasn't in a situation like that, whatever. So sometimes what we on the outside looking in often feel is this sort of jealousy, this sort of left outness, because we don't have the bond.
Right.
And me and you are pretty close. We're close, but we're not bonded like some of the things that you've been through some of your brothers and sisters with, right? And so some people feel some type of way about that on the outside.
Right.
How do we help them to understand that it's just different, and you can't compare the two bonds, right?
Well,
go
go ahead.
please.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think, an unhealthy bond is still a bond.
Right.
And and change is hard. So, when you have someone who's healthy, like, for example, let's say people are snacks,
Why you go there? She's like, I got a bad bond
I
with
got a problem with
food.
food.
You are a snack.
Yeah. So you have apples, they're good for you.
Mhm.
But then you have potato chips. Well, the potato chips make you feel good
Mhm.
because the carbs, but you're supposed to eat that. And so you try, and so you do it once or twice. You're like, look at me, I've done it. And then the next thing you know, something bad's happened, and
Mhm.
the response I mean, the stimulus to response is so short. Next thing you know, you're eating chips. You don't even know why.
Right.
You know, because that trauma bond
Right.
with even that person. Well, I'm going to call so and so. I
Right.
know they're not healthy for me, but I know that they're going to understand me.
Yeah.
We're going to go out. I'm going to feel
Yeah.
better. But you're not really feeling better. It's just that the neural pathway in your brain is being satisfied.
And it's explaining to those again, like if you and I were married, Devin, and I'm like, God forbid, she said it right, because I would be in trouble. She's driving me nuts. We have to be able to find a way to explain, hey, I know that we're connected here, but I just need this. That's the conversation that needs to happen with those on the outside, especially if you're married or, you know, you have somebody that you're married to or close to that's not in that world. Hey, I just need this. Just like a client would need a therapist's help for the X, Y, and Z, right? Or a pastor's help or something like that. We have to find a way to communicate that. I get that we're connected and we are close, but right now I need something from them that they have that you can't offer.
Well, and I think that is one reason, maybe indirectly it started, our peer support systems in fire, police, and EMS.
Has that grown more?
Yes,
Recently?
definitely, yeah. And so you have, you know, like Virginia Beach Fire and Virginia Beach Police, Virginia Beach Police has an amazing peer support program.
So is it similar to mental health and substance use peer support in my recovery circles? Like, explain what peer support is in the first responder world.
Right, so I think what it does is it keeps, in Virginia Beach Police and Fire and EMS, we are working to not only have a peer support team, but we have a policy and then we have training. And that training is what's going to keep people from becoming enmeshed, having an unhealthy codependent relationship. Because you have coworkers who are together and they start helping each other, whatever go on, and then one is taking more than the other, and the other one feels guilty for not helping, and then it's this weird bond.
Right.
You know, they're dodging the phone calls.
Right.
You know, it's just not healthy. So I like the fact that throughout the country, there's being more peer support programs are being created with teams that have training, so they can say, wait, we need to get you a professional. This is not healthy. What's going on here? The shift is way too enmeshed. You know, maybe transfers need to happen or what have you. But so I'm glad that that's happening because our brothers and sisters can't always be the one to help us.
Right.
Sometimes they pull us down like the crab mentality and they don't even know it.
And they're stuck in the same situation you are.
Right.
So, yeah. Was that, I mean, it's been a few years since you've been around. Was that a thing? Or is this more of a recent
That
development?
sounds like a more recent thing. I can't attest to now.
Yeah.
But that wasn't around.
Yeah.
At least not the department I worked for.
So that's what's funny because on one hand, and we hear this in a lot of different circles, but it's like this sort of kinder, gentler, right? But we're like, that didn't exist back when I was going through it. I like that exists now. I wish it did before, but we didn't have that. So it's funny how we'll take things and make it then that's what makes them softer. But no, that doesn't make your work any less intense or less risky or less, you know, or weaker. It's just more resources available. It's more awareness. And I think I would think that awareness is strength, right?
Yes.
Whereas like in the past, we thought, well, we didn't care about that. It's like playing football. Like we didn't wear helmets, right? Like, okay, that worked out well for you.
Right. Or the old, you know, adage of, well, you knew what you were getting into.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
cannot.
Well, you knew.
Who do you hear that from? Inside or outside, or both? Okay.
Both.
Yeah?
That's the most frustrating thing.
Why does that? Yo, that hit a nerve. I ain't seen the nerve like that hitting you been in a minute.
Yeah.
Why did that hit one so much? She
Well,
did it on purpose.
No, there's a lot of, I think that's the mentality in the, like, you get in this profession, same, I'm sure, as a firefighter, where you're there. I just wanted to help people. Okay. And I remember when I started, I mean, I don't even think I was making 30K. And you're working long hours, you're putting your life on the line.
Yep.
You have a risk of making a bad decision and all the other things that we talked about.
Yep.
And you're just out there trying to help people. And when somebody comes up and says that, it just kind of, it's like, okay, well, you know, I'm protecting you. I'm keeping you from your house being broken into. I'm keeping you from, you know, the child porn that's circulating around your neighborhood. We're getting rid of that for you.
Right.
We're getting rid of the narcotics.
Right.
And your answer is to kind of almost like deal with it.
Right.
And
Can I see you doing that to your mechanic or your plumber? Like you knew what you were getting into.
Right.
All right, then I'm just gonna leave it like this, right? Like
It's kind of like me dirtying up, I don't know, going in the bathroom and spilling water everywhere and just going, up, you're a janitor. You kind of signed up for it.
Yeah.
To me, that's kind of how it comes
Yeah.
across to me.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know, I just think there's a mentality where a lot of things just aren't understood. And it's, I think one of the biggest things is fighting being calloused. And it's hard not to, because I can't, I don't have an answer to that. I really don't. You're looking evil in the eye. I mean, constantly. I remember, just certain calls that you end up becoming so calloused. You see such violence and just disgusting acts.
Like the depravity of certain men or certain people in certain
Sure.
situations.
I mean, I can think of an example of, we had this family. The wife was having some issues, thinking about suicide, and she just never did anything, wrote some letters. But at one point she told her husband, hey, here's the WIC card. Can you go get some milk real quick? And what she did was she immediately hung herself in the hallway. And her 7-year-old son came out and saw it. And the 7-year-old was trying to push the mom up.
Wow.
And I was the first one on the scene. And the first thing that kid said to me was, I tried to save my mom. I tried to save my mom. And you're in an instance where you're just looking at that poor kid, and without meaning to, just you're just saying, man, that kid has no chance in life. He's going to be screwed up for the rest of his life. And you try to fight that because you want to be positive, but after repeatedly seeing this stuff, it turns you in,
you have to, because you still have a job to do.
Exactly,
you still have some things to the point of and that's horrible, because again, and we hear it even in some of the world and some of the work we do, not nearly to the level that you do, but you knew some of what you were getting into, because I don't think that it's an accurate statement. If you knew all the ins and outs, if you knew all the details, if you knew the suicide reports that you would go to or the kids that you would run into, you're like, I don't know that I would choose that. You'd have to be some special kind of messed up to go and choose that. So I knew I was going into working and helping people or seeing some difficult situations, but you can't really fully know some of the things that you saw. I remember certain stories you used to tell me, Ben, and you were like, yo, that was my first one. And I mean, that one really stuck with me. And I knew I was going to a certain type of call, but I didn't know it was going to be like that. Or I didn't know it was going to hit me like that. Because you don't really fully know, right?
Right, you don't. You see the worst of people. No one calls 911 when everything's going well. They only call when someone's drowning or, breaking in, someone's been shot. I mean, you just see the bad of everybody. And so then that's sort of where your first go-to is. And to speak about, why we become first responders, to back up, first of all, the bystander effect in psychology is alive and well. That, the bystander effect, for those who don't know, is when something bad happens, they just take a step back and go, well, I don't know what to do. I'm going to get sued. I don't know what to do. Someone else will help. And so then that's when fire and police and EMS and so forth, other jobs had to be created so that, we are called and we are we go and help because we want to. But then on a trauma thought process, we help because maybe in our childhood we weren't protected, or maybe something happened in our childhood that we felt like we weren't helped as what we should. So we're always in the state of trying to help. We're sort of reliving our own story moment after moment. And that's why trauma work's so important, is to realize that you still can be a first responder and still have it together. You don't have to be in the state of trauma all the time.
So let's switch gears to that a little bit. Guys, we're doing great. Like, I pray and I hope that people are listening and really sending in some questions, but really listening to the conversation, whether it's now or later, that you really take in some of the things that are being said, because I think that you guys are talking general enough that this affects everybody in your worlds. So let's talk about the needs from a mental health support standpoint, because again, and Ben, you said it earlier, I'm not gonna reach out. You knew I was a therapist. I've been doing a therapy for a while. You never called me hey, so I should probably come see you for therapy. I wasn't a first responder. You're like, you ain't doing this. We were cool. We would barbecue together, but you're not gonna tell me your deepest, darkest traumas, because I wasn't one of you. Why is there such a divide on reaching out for help now, when we recognize that it's more and more the commonplace. When we recognize the impact that it's had, you guys have done a great job of laying that foundation, and yet we still have struggles getting folks to reach out and ultimately taking matters into their own hands, which is not okay. Why is there still such a struggle to get help? Do you see that? Is there? Maybe I'm making it up.
Well, from my experience, and I've had more people say this to me, is when they come into the office, they go, I think I should have been here a long time ago. You know, or media, television, movies, they don't do us a service. You know, I've had people come in and go, do I lay down? I'm like, well, you can.
Right.
You'll be the first.
Yeah, right. And I don't know if my couch is big enough, like you're tall, like I don't know.
I mean, you know, I've had people take their shoes off. They're like, I don't know, am I supposed to? I'm like, you just talk. There's no secret here. I can't read your mind.
Yeah, there's a sort of stigma that exists in some of the work that we're going to do, and we don't go right in and poke right at your sore spots right away. We wait at least 7 minutes before we start poking.
Yeah, well, I wait 8.
Wow, you're patient.
But I would hope that the clients that I see leave the office after my assessment and go, we are more alike than we are different.
Yeah.
You know, whether they're a first responder or not. I think we all have the same hopes and dreams. And something that's happened in their past or going on now is just you know, creating them to stumble a little bit.
I know that with you, it's taken the intent and the one-on-one invite. You need to come see me, or that needs to come here, right? It's almost like it has to happen. Like you got out. I don't know your therapy history or not, right? But I didn't know you then to say, Ben, go see John tomorrow. Okay, right? Like it has to be personal and intimate and intentional to try to bring somebody out, rather than saying, yo, I probably need this now, and trying to seek it out on our own, right? Like how many guys did you know that were seeking out help on their own? Like, yo, I need help, bro.
Can't think of anybody, at least that they told me about.
Yeah, because that's the other part of it. I was going to say that was that it's kept under wraps. Like I needed this a long time ago, but I ain't telling nobody, you know?
Well, I think it's a trust issue. I think that's the biggest thing. Is I'm just trained and taught that you see evil in everything. I immediately go to terrible things. If you say a profession, I can think of that, this. And it's just experiences. And I think, again, you're just not comfortable sharing that stuff because you kind of develop I can trust my brothers and sisters here, but the outside world, they're always criticizing me or they're thinking things of me, and they don't understand what I'm going through, kind of thing.
Here's a weird on the spot question. You ready? I had to throw a couple zingers at you.
No.
Too bad. It's gonna happen anyway. You've been out 7 years or so.
11 years.
11 years. Is there a expiration date on seeking help? Like, do you reach a point where you're like, because you even the ones you're sharing now tonight, like there's some things you go through that you're like, they're there like it was yesterday, like it was this morning, but it's been 11 years, so now I'm good now. Or is there like, because now you're out, you're still serving, so it's different for you, Debbie, right? But there's almost like an expiration date of seeking help. Do you think, or do you think that it's still necessary?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I get one every now and then.
Let me think about that one for a second.
What do you think? While he's thinking, what do you think? Obviously, you think that there's always a time for help. I'm assuming.
Right. I think that until you can, right. So for example, like the child who is, goes through a difficult time in their childhood, and then the kind of trauma starts to bubble up, and they come talk to me as a therapist. I have to remind them that they are looking at the problem as an adult. They need to remember that they were 7 years old. They have to use that 7-year brain, 7-year-old brain to think about what was going on. I think it's the same thing as first responders, and can we truly move through that? I think maybe we can with time and almost like reprogramming, choosing not to have a lot of friends in the first responder community, or, changing your, what you watch on TV. I mean, and that's just a guess. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. But then the question is, do they really want to?
Right.
Because, retirement for first responders is really difficult.
Yeah. And I think that I'm assuming, so oftentimes they'll say, okay, I'll handle this when I retire or when X, Y, and Z. But then we always find a reason to push it off because I made it this far, or something else kind of sprung up that we weren't even planning for.
Sure.
Right? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think a couple things. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you always can use help. I mean, and you never want to turn it down. I think there's different avenues of looking for it. Me specifically, I had mentors and people in the church community that poured into my life, and I'm extremely thankful for that to this day. Other people might reach out in a different other way. Maybe it is, reaching out to a practice and talking to some people, and I think it's just a lot of it is where you're just kind of set that this is how it is. This is what you experience. Even for me right now, I remember it was unheard of to call out sick.
Right.
You were considered a wuss if you called out sick.
Right.
And not only because of that, but you're short-staffed, so that you're essentially screwing over your buddies by not being at work, no matter how sick you are.
Yeah.
And I think of other things like a back injury. Like we were taught to just suck it up, man.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm going to chiropractor constantly to still fix problems in my back. So it's just stuff that, I guess, going back to your example, I think through everything, there are results from the job. And I think that there's ways to deal with them. And I think it is important to find a way to fight it. I remember before I left, I was like, man, I am a bitter, always angry person.
Yeah.
And I want to change. I don't want to, I want to experience life and love and to do that, you have to get rid of some of that stuff. You got to enjoy life. And if you're constantly angry and upset, you're not going to get anywhere. And,
I can remember meeting you, like we go back, like you had just got out pretty much a year or two, I guess, or something like that. But watching the tension in there, in the anger, and the kind of fizzled out. It took a long time to watch it literally like leave your body, because you stayed, like you guys had said earlier, on the state of hyper awareness, on the state of, readiness all the time to watch yourself say, this is okay, this is okay, this is okay, and I'm still okay, right? Like, it's gonna take time. I don't think that it's an overnight thing. For those that are watching this, that have a first responder in their life, this is not overnight. You're not gonna tell them, watch this podcast, then go sign up for therapy tomorrow. That's not how it works. Right? Like, not even close. This is gonna take time, and it takes a lot of patience, because you're letting go of a lot of things that kept you alive to this point. Right? So this is gonna take time.
Right? I think it can also change within departments. The fire chiefs down, the kinds of language that they use when talking about mental health. If I were to say to Ben, if you ever need any help, you can go see these people. Okay, well, now you feel like, okay.
Right.
Right. That's like, if you got a problem with your bunions, like, go see him. You're like, thanks.
But if I were to say, my cousin, John, they went to go see this person. Okay, well, that makes it a little bit better.
Right.
But if you say, when I've had difficulties before, I went to go see this practice, it's been helpful. And that just changes a lot. So it's the language that people use too, I think is important.
So how would you, Debbie, you see a lot of first responders now in different communities, different levels, different types of first response work. How would you encourage them to advocate for this? What do they say on their squads, on their teams, and their shifts, and their whatever, to say, yo, you need to do this, like, this was good? Because I think that we also hear it takes the type of person. We know this already, personality-wise, like the outspoken person to say it, you're like, all right, I get it from him. But if the one that we thought was crying in the corner every day of their shift, I ain't gonna listen to him anyway. I expected that, right? Like, there's almost a way to say this. And how do you encourage the advocacy to seek out this help?
So I think, so what's happened to me a few times, which created some anxiety for me, which I'm glad we have two separate entrances here, is I didn't realize that a new person coming in was a first responder. And so one person was leaving, and they're like, oh, hey, how you doing? Shaking each other's hands, going, oh, you come here too? And I'm like, oh, God, I'm so sorry. And so I talked to both of them. They're like, oh, no, this is great, And so now I think they make their appointments soon together so they can see each other. I don't know.
That's awesome.
But so, at first I was really concerned. And so I let them both know, hey, let me know, and I can have you sit in a separate room or whatever, just for confidentiality. And so that's been good. And I've gotten a lot of referrals, like, well, so-and-so told me that they see you. And so that's been promising. But I think a lot of times people will say, I'll see her, and maybe things get a little bit better, and then they put me on the
Yep.
you know,
Yep. They hold
in the
off.
corner,
Yep.
and that's okay, you know. But I think it's
There's like a stigma that exists about coming here, and so it takes us to be vocal to erase some of the stigma, some of the negative stigma that exists about seeking help and seeking this type of help, right? You are still. It's funny to watch Debbie work, yo. When I know she's full on a firefighter, still in this area or in this practice, and she'll say some firefighter-esque stuff. Like you were talking about the language and things that are said. You're like, yeah, Debbie's here. Like that is not how your typical thing. So you are fully welcome to be yourself. But we almost feel like if we got to walk through the door, we got to put on a different persona or a different front, a different mask. Be you, and it's okay to be you, and then say, yo, I just went somewhere. I went to Meridian, and I was still allowed to be myself. You know, it was cool, and they didn't ask me to say this or do that, right? Like,
yeah, because the front staff will often say, "Oh yeah, this one's for Debbie," because you know we're wearing our fire police shirts,
right,
you know,
right.
They all give me challenge coins, you know, they've got the mustache, you know, all that kind of stuff, and they're like, okay.
For me, it's the walk. When somebody, depending on how somebody's walking or standing, I'm like, yeah, man, you're in the right place. I'm glad you're here, right? Like, and y'all know what you do, right? Ben standing in the corner like this, you know, you're just like, get your hands off your hips, bro. You're okay. You're gonna be all right. You're in shorts and a t-shirt. It's gonna be all right, you know. But you're allowed to be yourself. I think part of the advocacy that we've got to encourage is that be yourself here, be yourself at the station, be yourself in the community, right? Be you.
Which I think also creates, you know, brings up a good point that we talk about the brotherhood and sisterhood a lot, but that's where it's lacking, is that our brotherhood and sisterhood are about saving each other in the buildings and the fires. We're there for each other, but maybe when someone's being real or they need to talk to somebody, who do they talk to? And sometimes they'll talk to someone on their shift and tell a friend, tell a firefighter. You know, everyone's then talking, and that's the last thing that we want. We want someone to be able to, you know, talk to their captain or their sergeant or whoever and feel like they are going to be heard. And that is changing. There's good changes going on in the United States with peer support. But there's going to be always maybe that older captain that, you know, wants to make jokes and make someone feel bad, and then it just puts a step backward. But the way we change that is when someone's talking smack about someone, they go, I'm not interested in hearing that. And you stop it. Right.
I think we've changed, Debbie. I've heard you, when you first started with us, almost change the definition of brave and strength. Words like bravery and strength. Whereas it had a certain sort of connotation in the past. Now it's encompassed, you know, this ability to talk about my stuff and still stand on the job and do this and this and this. You know, what does bravery really look like now? It's not just, you know, taking the bullet and be like, yeah, I didn't feel nothing. You know, it's just like, hey, yo, that hurt. I need to go see a doctor. I'm gonna lose the feeling in my arm, but I'm still going, right? Like it's owning both, right? Like it's those things. Bravery and strength has come to really take on a fuller definition, I would hope to say. Now, it's hard for older generations or people who've been trained in sort of an old way to accept that, but it has, right? Like, I don't see any less bravery or strength in the work that people are doing now in first responder work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're full on, just as brave, just as strong as they were 11 years ago, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Because the problems have changed. The contents of homes have changed. The materials that things are made out of changed, and so that makes fighting fire and rescue and people and structures a little bit different, and medical problems and drugs and, you know, better equipment and stuff like that. I think is so, you know, it's just, I agree with you.
So the language, I think, has to be being able to give a description of what strength really means now. This is adding to your strength, adding to your bravery, your ability to do this, not just to rush into a burning building, but also to rush into your therapist's office and say, yo, I need help.
Right.
And that's strong. And how we change the language and how we refer to it, I think is really key. Yeah?
Well, and I think just to even take a step further, especially for police officers, is when they suffer from substance abuse or mental health issues and or dual diagnoses such as those, and they need inpatient help. The first thing they say is, well, I'm not going to go to the local hospital because I know everyone I've arrested there. Right. Or the last thing they want people to know is that they're a cop.
Right.
That's not good.
Right.
So what I want people to know is for police and fire and EMS, there are hospitals and inpatient programs all throughout the country that are just for police officers. And I can get you in that.
That's good.
Right? And there's programs that help pay for that.
Yep.
If you don't have insurance or what have you. It's, so I don't want people to go, well, I don't want to go to there or go here or whatever. I mean, of course they can go local, that's not a problem, but there's trauma retreats all throughout the country that you just put in your name and do your story, and they pick so many people a year, and you go on this free week or two program. And it's full of therapists and therapy dogs and really cool stuff. So,
Was that encouraged 11 years ago?
Was that around? Is that what you said?
Was that encouraged?
No.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not dissing where you work. I'm not dissing who you work for, but it just wasn't like the awareness has to be there. I think that ignorance is crippling because we didn't know. It might have been around the whole time, but we just did not put it as one of the available options.
Right. Yeah.
That's what's crazy about it, I think.
Yeah, and now we can, like here in Virginia, Optima now is being accepted by the IFF hospital up in Maryland. That's amazing. A lot of unions and departments, both volunteer and career, worked hard to get that changed. But even without there's money and there's grants and there's so forth that we can get people into them.
Yeah.
And just because you go into the hospital doesn't mean that the department can call the hospital and find out what's going on.
Yeah.
You're just like a normal human being who's going to the hospital.
So we're still going real people, real talk. This conversation is so helpful and enlightening to me. I thought I knew a lot. I thought I've known everything because I'm a know-it-all, sure. Clearly I don't know. How does it help to educate some of us? Because what I hear, Debbie, like from you and especially hanging out with you a lot is like those that are friendly to our cause, friendly to our community. I'm not one of you, right? And I'm not a tag along, so to speak, but it's like, I know things like, yo, he's trusted. You can go here, or how do you get people to see what is a friendly or a trusted or a helpful place that you can go to that is not one of us, right? Within the department's order. How do you go into the community? How do you say, yo, where is a good spot? Then like, go to this place here.
I think it's the research that you do with Virginia Beach and me being part of the peer support program. I've called different therapists in the area and I've reminded people and therapists, just because you've had a first responder in your office does not make you a culturally competent therapist. It just means that they didn't know where else to go.
That's a good word there, cultural competence, because we often just confuse that with race or ethnicity. Cultural competence with regards to the culture that is the first responder community.
Right. So if I were to say to Ben here, have you ever been in a store and you heard the same tone go off somewhere on someone's phone? And he's probably gonna be, and what does that do? It makes you go, oh, and then you go, oh wait, no, I'm not at work. I don't have a call. But if you talk to someone else who doesn't understand even what a call is, or, I can have someone come in and go, I was up all night at a fire. I gotcha. I know exactly what that is.
And even down to the point of, from a cultural competence sort of standpoint with positioning, like I joked about Ben standing in the corner of the lobby, to how you situate yourself in the room, right? You can use a big room like we're in now because you need more space just in case you need movement, to where you sit. Body positioning, proximity, all of these sort of things that are competent or they're culturally sensitive to the needs of your individual.
So why do you think I don't have pictures of people saving people in fires in my office? Right? No one wants to see that.
To us, it's the coolest thing. We're like, of course, it's great. I saw Ben jumping off a building, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't want to see all that.
I just have my fire helmet. I have some police stuff in there. I have challenge coins. I don't have anything that's triggering. And what you find and what you know is triggering, we don't know. And so it takes the education, right? And it takes us being willing to be educated on what is triggering, what is not. Like you said, the sound, I never would have thought of like, the alarm, somebody's ringtone, or, the sound that the door makes when it hits or whatever, Yeah, years ago, when I worked in Suffolk, everything was done by tones. You'd have like different levels of tones go on and off, and whatever your station was had a specific tone. Well, there was a tone similar in an aircraft that told stewardess something, and it was the same tone, and it piqued me there for a second. I was like, oh wait, what? You know, we got a call. I'm like, no.
So now look, this is the comedy interlude. But I'm gonna tell you a story about tones with Debbie. Like she already knows. We're doing supervision because you got to get supervised to get a license. We would meet at random restaurants throughout for the couple of years. We would meet at restaurants and go over clinical cases and staffings and material and whatever. Look at her face. You know this. Don't you know, brother? Every time we was out somewhere, she would hear a siren. First of all, the phone was horrible because she always had the scanner on. I'm like, please turn it off. You got to focus. Okay, but it was just like muted a little bit like the teenage children do, right? But the siren would go off from 38 blocks north. And just like my puppies do, her ear would go up and she's like, I'm like, is her back hurting? Like, what's wrong with her? Yeah, I hear you. So if y'all do this out there, I really need to know if y'all do this
I love
because
the job.
yo, this was insane. Do you do this? Like you hear a siren, you're like,
You always look around and try to figure out what's going on. I mean, you're always assessing everything. Anytime you walk in a building, anytime you walk in a store,
Yeah.
you're always looking for a threat. I mean,
Yep.
It's just how you're trained.
dude, it doesn't matter what story we're in. It doesn't matter what case. She's like, so one time John was doing. I was like, you want to finish telling me about John? She left me on the cliffhanger. She's just like,
Yeah.
I said, you know where they're going, right? I know where they're going. I heard it on the scanner. You know what they're going to do? They're going to help. Can we get back to our work? God forbid, right?
Yeah.
But it's always funny because, like you said, it piques your interest. You're always on. Again, it's the sensitivity that we need to know that you're going to hear it and you're going to react a certain way. It's in you. I mean, it is really wired into you. But man, if it's not the funniest thing in the world,
You're not wrong.
she is horrible. She can't be the only one, y'all. Y'all gonna have to tell me. There's certain places we'll go to. I'm like, no, it's too close to a station. She goes, please.
I don't do that.
Oh, she does all the way.
No, but it's funny how little things trigger
Yeah.
certain things. I joke about it, but I had a call years ago where this lady, unfortunately, was trying to cut herself. She broke a window, got the glass, and was trying to cut herself. And there was deviled eggs. And she grabbed those and kind of smeared them all over herself. And I was the second one on the scene. I was able to calm her down and we're able to get her the help she needed. But till 2 years ago, the smell of deviled eggs, I couldn't eat them.
Wow.
Just from that.
Now, what did your wife say? Was she like, come on, bro? Like, really? Or
No, she understood.
Yeah.
She gets it, but it's funny to think and sad at the same time, but it's just certain things that
the kind
you
of
think about it and you're just like, man, I can't do it.
Yeah.
My mind goes to that scene in that area and it just
Yeah.
grosses me out and I also feel
Right.
bad for that person. So it's just
Yeah.
a mix of
Yeah.
emotions. So it's interesting how that.
That's wild.
But I think the hypervigilance of being a parent,
Yeah.
is high anyways.
Sure.
You don't want your kid to get hurt. But then as a first responder, you see stuff like, I wouldn't have a trampoline in my backyard if it was given to me for free.
Yep.
Because I've seen too many heads burst
Mhm.
open and broken legs and messed up
Mhm.
stuff. And so my poor son, he had all these rules growing up.
Yeah.
You had to wear your helmet, and of course he had cool hair, so that was not an okay thing.
Right.
And so he just chose not to ride his bike. He was the only one of his friends.
Now he's in there because I never rode a bike.
And so I just wish that, but they go to the beach and it's like, okay, well, look, this is how you get out of this and that. And the other parents are like, oh, have a good time. Here's $20. I'll see you, let me know when you're heading home. And I'm like looking, checking where he's at. It really makes you crazy as a parent because you see things that, you see kids dead because of poor choices they've made, accidents. And so you just want to call your son or your kid and make sure they're okay.
Right. Ricky on here said that he still deals with some of the tones and to your point about all these things and the reminders, it's your ability, I think, this is my interpretation, but your ability to keep a foot in both worlds of saying, I know where I was, I know what it triggers, but I know I'm not there anymore. This is sort of real quick, like you're saying here, her trigger sort of rapid fire in your head of like, I'm not there anymore, so I can laugh about double eggs. No, yes, that was serious. Yes, this was legit. but I'm not there, so I can laugh. And I'm allowed. You almost have to talk yourself through that and walk yourself through that. You know, and even with the tongues.
Right. Well, I think also, and to make a very loose parallel, if you will, of institutionalization and being a first responder. You know, you live all these years working with, you know, in my case, 4 to 8 people, spend 24 hours, 10 days a month with them. You know them better than their spouses. You know, like we all, I mean, we have a chat group. We chat almost every day about stupid jokes back and forth and talking, but we know when the other one's not well, and we know what's expected. You get there, you clean up, you do the, you know, all the stuff. Same thing with being institutionalized. You know what's expected, and then one day you retire and you're like, I don't really know what to do.
Right, you know where I belong.
Right, and then you go to one of my coworkers said that he went to a birthday party, stood over there with all the men and made a joke, and that did not do well. They were all business people, and then they're here we are.
Yeah, you're right. So let's talk about that there, because one of our buddies, Kenny, shout out to Kenny up in Richmond.
Hey Kenny,
Kenny,
miss you.
Operation Yellow Tape was very supportive of us here at Meridian, here with Life Change, and here with this podcast. But he's doing the actual work of supporting families up there. We're dealing with a lot of loss. We're dealing with a lot of suicidality. We're dealing with a lot of depression, a lot of the stigma or the secret of, but we want to preserve these lives. And it's still happening. It's not that we're not going to lose people. I know that. But that the thought is that we go through all these times, all these shifts, all this time together, and we still can't reach out to stay alive. That's hard. And so, Kenny, shout out to you and my condolences to the families that are dealing with this now actively, both in Richmond and all around. How do we express to our first responders that are watching and to our family members, like, hey, this is serious and we need help. We need to keep you alive and we need to keep us going. What gets in the way? What is it? Is it a lack of awareness of the resources again? Is it a feeling like nobody will get it? But we got to talk. We can't take our lives. We got to stop taking our lives.
Right. And I think it's, you know, one thing I say in practice with people is, especially with kids, but also with first responders, is that all things change. Even the good stuff changes. You don't want to live at Disney World. You know, you want to go on vacation and you want to go, or wherever, the beach or the cruise, go, I don't want to go home. This is great. But you have to. Everything changes. You can't be there because then you're going to be like, I hate this. I want to go home. You know, and so the same thing with our bad feelings that we have and our suicidal thoughts, they will change. I promise you they will change. It's the cognitive distortions that we base our life around, you know, using the word should and I could have done, or I must do that, or black or white thinking. Well, you know, like the movie, I always say it wrong. I'm not going to pretend to say it. It's with Ricky Bobby.
Oh, Talladega Nights.
That word.
Say that word.
No.
Y'all know now, catch her with that word.
You know, if you're not first, you're last. That black and white thinking. You know, if you don't do everything right on scene as the captain, well, then you are a loser or whatever. And those cognitive distortions will eat you alive because instead of stopping and saying, hey, let me find out what are all the facts and do the facts support that I'm a loser? Well, no, not at all.
And how even we define facts, because what we seemingly hear in our heads as facts is not facts at all. But they're so true and so real to us, but they're not factual at all.
And that's why we cannot be our judge, juror, and executioner. We've got to reach out and say, hey, what does this sound like? Because 9 times out of 10, they're going to go, you know. Like I worked with a lady the other day, and she said, I'm such a bad mom, I'm this, I'm that. I'm like, well, tell me about your day. Well, her kid's safe, her kid's fed, and she took her kid to the zoo. I said, you're an amazing mom. You're doing all that, you know? Who cares if you're not keeping up with, you know, the next door neighbor who's going on vacation? The kid's not going to remember that. They're going to remember that mom spent time with them at the zoo.
Well, it's so, you know, suicide is an issue that we have in all our communities, right? In all our mental health, this is the work we do in our substance use world, in our first responder world, just in communities in general. There is help. There is availability for help. It doesn't last, but it seems so real and it seems so appropriate even for the moment that we're going through whatever
Mind
it
plays
is.
games on you.
Yeah, and it's for seemingly real things, right? But because I know you and I've talked, Ben, about life getting in the way or life falling apart all around us. And the only thing I have is my job, or my job had X, Y, and Z for the traumas and the things, and life was great. And how do I balance the two worlds, right, to make them actually work well? But when our lives are feeling seemingly like they're falling apart, it's overwhelming. It's very overwhelming. How do you encourage, Ben, somebody to reach out for that and for help and to see, like, this isn't it. This doesn't have to be it.
Well, I think a lot of things that would help, I think the law enforcement community is there. Certain things trigger those thoughts, right? I've never been there. I can't say that I've experienced or have any insight on that specifically other than the cases I've worked involved in those situations. But I feel like taking the life of a law enforcement officer and thinking about the different stresses, not only, and I'm not talking about out in the field or, on the job, but even just marriage. I think that's a huge one. I mean, I know first responders, that's a huge issue, the divorce rate.
Right, the divorce rate of first responders.
The first thing they told us in the academy when I was in there was, a lot of you all are going to be divorced, you're going to be alcoholics, and you're going to commit suicide. And all of us kind of laughed and we're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I've seen that through a lot of my relationships, and I've seen it destroy so many different things. And I think even certain things like a spouse or a partner, whatever the case is, that they can be kind of educated on the law enforcement life, so they can kind of relate to their significant other. I think that's pretty important, because I feel like they can never understand. You're not going to go out to the dinner table and, hey, how was your day? Well, I picked up a 8-year-old kid that killed themselves, or whatever the case is. They can't experience that. So just being able to help them and understand, I think, would be a good resource. And I think it's just a job where you're going to be tired. You're going to be working crazy hours. You're not going to be always mentally there at times because you're tired, you're exhausted. And I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't have an answer to that. I followed my calling. I went and did it. And I know everybody out there that's doing it, you're doing it. And you're answering the call, and we appreciate that.
I think that it's scary too, Ben, because I wish that we can get on here and say, okay, look for this sign, look for that sign.
Right.
We can't. We can't definitively tell you it's this, and this that leads to this, or look for these warning signs. But
so I will say,
I was going to say changes. There are some signs.
Right. So I think, especially with the fire department, and EMS, because we are with the same people for so long, for such a great amount of time. Police, maybe sometimes, maybe not. Isolation and not sleeping are huge. If your buddy John is normally, out there chatting all the time, cleaning up, and all of a sudden he's not, and he's just, whatever, you need to be watching John, especially, and we don't sleep well anyways.
Right.
And if we are sleeping, why are we sleeping? Are you taking sleeping pills? Are you, whether they are prescribed or not? Are you doing drugs? Are you drinking yourself to oblivion? That kind of stuff. But I would say isolation is the number one thing that you got to watch out for your people. And when people tell you they're having a problem, believe them.
Believe it. Right. You don't lose anything from believing it.
Yeah. When I get phone calls and go, hey, so-and-so said blah, 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 but, I think he's okay. I'm like, okay, well, thanks. I'm so thankful that you called, but I don't think he's okay. So let's pretend he's not and just see what this might mean. And then let's do some research, provide resources. And then, because at the end of the day, we all have self-determination. We all have the choice to do what we want to do with our lives. It may be the worst choice ever.
And we know that the stark changes in behavior, right? Abrupt changes in patterns of behavior. Like you said, you guys have spent so much time together and been through so many intimate moments and calls and things. And when there's an abrupt change in something, you're like, yo, something's up. And I think that's that spidey sense, right? That's that stuff that you're like, yo, this isn't okay. Something's up. And I don't know what it is. It's not always assuming that you're not safe, but I'd rather, again, be better safe than sorry, because I know that something's up and something's changed here. So I can't tell you one behavior to look for or not. Sleep is important too, because it plays so many tricks on your mind.
Yeah.
And I think that the lack of self-care, recent medical diagnoses, right? You guys have put yourself in harm's way so many times and have exposed so many things. And now, recent medical diagnoses say, yo, let's just make sure that you're good. Doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to do something that you're going to regret, but I want to make sure you're okay. Right? Anything that it really abruptly hits, where you said, Ben, it's so accurate. We see trauma, first responders see trauma so many times in 6 months. This hits a different way, so this is not the same type of trauma. So I think that those are things obviously that are enough to be a heads up, but we can't tell you this one thing or this one thing. Like, we're not going to do that.
Right.
We're not going to disrespect the person or the work.
Right. Well, I think also when you have a municipality who, maybe, of course, not everyone in the city is going to understand what we do, but the people who are in charge of placing you on light duty or seeing if you're going to be able to stay in the department, maybe they're not from the first responder world. That's scary, because then you are being, your future is sort of controlled by policy. And so I'm thankful that Virginia Beach Fire and EMS and police are so supportive of the peer support programs that, they're willing to say, hey, go talk to Debbie or go talk to, whoever. And so we can sort of figure it out. Before it gets to be something that we can't reverse.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, look, nobody on the 988 phone number that you would dial for suicide hotline knows you, okay?
Yeah,
they don't know you. If Ben calls them, they're gonna be like, oh, Ben, what up? Like, it's not how it goes, right? Like, so the fear that I might run into somebody or somebody may look at me differently or whatever, you're reaching out to a national hotline that can get you connected to some resources immediately. The point is that you reach out. The point is that you do something. You can't sit with it. You can't sit in isolation with it.
Right.
And if they didn't know you and they know you needed help right now,
yeah,
bring the person that laughs at you for that to me. I'll take care of that. I'm putting that on record. Like, I'll take care of that person because I got something special for them. Because I think that when you reach out and you have the guts to say, yo, I need help.
Right. And, here at Meridian, if you are a first responder anywhere in Virginia, all you have to do is call Meridian and say, I want to see Debbie Jones. I'm a first responder. Even if my caseload is closed, I still will open it for all first responders. I make a phone call within 48 hours of their phone call to say, hey, let's meet on a Saturday for 20 minutes, just touch base. We do a quick assessment and then get you on my caseload. But there'll never be a sorry, she can't see you. I will see you at midnight on a Sunday. But you just have to make the phone call.
And it's funny, Debbie, because when you came on, I was like, how is that going to work? I know your crazy schedule. You share your schedule with me. It's crazy. It's insane. You're never in one place on the same day at the same time and whatever. And you're like, I got to make this work. I will make this available to, my community because they need me and they need help. And so the fact that Meridian's willing to prioritize that. And I can't believe that we're the only ones in the state, let alone the country, that are going to do that. There is available help.
Yeah. I don't have the corner market on anything.
Right.
And I always tell first responders, hey, if I'm not it for you, if there's no connection, I will find another first responder therapist for you somewhere in Virginia.
Right. You said you've reached out a lot, Ben, to faith communities, to the church and that sort of thing. Is there something that faith communities could do to support this population?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just developing that, like Debbie has that, she has that experience, so she can relate. I think that kind of helps. I think mentorships, whether it's just having that experience, whether even it's military and police go hand in hand quite a bit. Just something that the trust develops immediately once you know somebody has that kind of experience or experienced somewhat of a traumatic experience as well. I can't tell you how many times on the phone I'll call and I'll say, I'm Ben Curran, so-and-so with this company, and I'm prior law enforcement. I know you're busy. As soon as I said, oh, and they tell me everything, it helps. So I think it's just me saying that opens up the door. So I think just having that, any of that kind of experience helps. I think the biggest thing is just trying to understand the lifestyle. One thing that is, it's just so easy to Monday quarterback. It's so easy to think you understand a position or that, this should have been responded that way or whatever the case is. Just try to understand that this person is, sleepless, going through their issues and trying to stay awake in a job that's people, it's not very appreciated. And it's kind of one of those things of just trying to understand their lifestyle. Maybe just researching some of the stats that I threw out, understanding what they go through on a daily basis, so you can understand what exactly goes on in their mind.
Well, I know a lot of cities use chaplains, and they're very, very helpful. In the city of Virginia Beach, the chaplain started with the police department, and then we stole some of them. And the upper admin who created that program with the fire department, I think they did a superb job getting the chaplains in the departments, meeting them, and I was fortunate enough to help train the chaplains. And one thing I always told them is that it's important that you're here for us. We can't be here for you. You know, we can't, you know, if, you know, maybe the language may not always be the best at the dinner table, but that's what it is. And if it's going to hurt your feelings, this is not the chaplain, you know, project for you.
Exactly.
But all the chaplains that I've met and worked with, they're amazing. So I think that is also another maybe untapped resource throughout the country that other departments could use.
Yeah, I think that the other part that that kind of speaks to me now, knowing that Kenny, our brother Kenny, was going to be here with us and is doing a lot of work to bring awareness to the mental health and substance use treatment world, is not just leading up to potential loss or leading up to a challenge or something that happens, but even after the fact, both within your communities, right, within the departments, within the stations, within the places, but also within the families, because a loss is a loss and they were significant. And so understanding that it's not like, man, we lost another one. Well, let's just keep going. And I guess we got to go on to the next one. No, there's a sensitivity to you as individuals have worked in this to say, yo, are we still okay? And making sure that we're okay so that it doesn't trickle to other issues that you may have, but also to the families and to the community as well. Right? Help is necessary across the entire spectrum, right? It's not just leading up to one thing, right? It's ongoing. I think that's why it was so cool, Ben, to have you come that many years after having signed out and took on a different job, is because this is still important. I called Ben for it. He's like, yeah, man, let's go. I was like, oh, that easy? Because we often think on the job, I can't do it, or about to retire, well, no, or right, like, or I'm a rookie, I can't do it. Like, no, this is important across the entire spectrum, the entire lifetime that I have. And same for family, same for the community, same for the station. You know, loss is a loss, and it's important.
Yeah.
And life's important. Man. Thank you, guys. I wanted to make sure I touched on that, because I think that we would be remiss to not address suicidal thoughts and thinking. The thoughts themselves aren't the trouble. They're going to happen. I mean, you guys have been through a lot. So life and death thoughts are not the danger. It's where
fleeting
we go.
Suicidal ideation is normal.
Right. And it's funny because that's almost, people who don't know this world are going to be like, what do you mean that's normal? That's not normal. That's not okay. Listen, we're good. Right? Like, I don't get mad at you for that part.
Right, yeah.
Right? It's what we're doing with it and how much we're entertaining it. But the fleeting thoughts that we have, or even some of the jokes, like, jokes are serious, but we need to talk about this. But I'm not going to get mad at you. I'm not going to throw you in somewhere just because you said one comment, right? But
yeah, when people say, oh, no, I never have those, I'm like, all right, well, let me know when you're done lying and we just move on. Because I do. Everyone has fleeting suicidal ideation. It's human nature. It's what you do with it. It's when it's no longer fleeting and you start having dreams, you start thinking that your life would be better, or you start looking at your insurance policy to see, well, is suicide covered? Or, you know, where would I make, you know, less of a mess? All that kind of stuff. Like the movie, if you haven't seen it yet, is A Man Named Otto. That is crazy. That's an amazing movie. And I'm not going to ruin it for anybody, but once you see that, you'll go, okay, I see.
I get it.
You know, so
yeah, I think that it's like, and you already touched on this from finding help, but it's finding those therapists and those with even that are kind of wearing both hats like you, that don't scare easy. Like, we're not going to scare easy by something like that. Like, yeah, I thought about death. All right, let's keep talking, rather than, okay, my guy, I got to find you. Relax. That's not like how it is. Just get help and let's have the conversations.
Right.
Because again, the conversation is worth it if it means preserving your life.
Right.
Debbie, you've done a lot to try to involve the dogs.
I know.
And I know that there's something to be said, man. With our previous Real People, Real Talk, y'all gonna have to check it out. But the dogs, we did it on pet therapy. How what role do dogs and do animals play? Equine therapy, I know, is big for the military community and even maybe first responders, right? But what role does that play in sort of bridging that, or being being able to soften or give them someone to focus on?
A lot of fire departments in this country now have station dogs or station cats. Like, they are assigned to that station, and the entire all 3 or 4 shifts.
Ben said he had a station possum. I mean, that was kind of weird, Ben. I don't know about that story, but I don't know if possums work, right? But I know, man. I'm sorry. I said I wouldn't let that one out, man. What was his name? It was Bubbles, right? I don't know. Yeah, Bubbles, the possum. But
and a lot of police officers, a lot of police departments, like Suffolk has a therapy dog that hangs out in the police department.
Cool.
When I've went up there before for different stuff.
Well, and you've brought our dogs. Our dogs are certified therapy dogs, and you've brought them to different stations. You brought them around to just give them a place to just be, right?
Yeah. And the empirical evidence research shows that just talking about your pet reduces blood pressure. And so when you bring an animal in and they're talking while they're petting the dog, I mean, it's just amazing. Or with my younger clients, they just talk to the dog.
Yeah, a lot of my clients will just sit there and talk to the dog. They will literally have a full-on conversation with the dog. I'm not even there, I'm just taking notes. I think that's cool. But I think that it's important that you find an outlet somewhere, right? And that you find, I wasn't never a dog lover until recently. I won't admit that I'm a lover now of dogs, but there's a place for them, right? There's a place where they can really serve to soften the edge. Yeah, she's still asleep over there. She turned her back to us now. I mean, that would help, right, Ben? Like,
I think you have to have outlets. I mean, that's definitely definitely proven. I think that goes for everything. But I mean, we can see that even with the COVID, kind of what happened with people kind of isolating themselves and not having hobbies, not going out, and just how that's affected mental health. So I think it goes with everything.
Yeah. So I encourage y'all, if whether it's our dogs here at Meridian, but if you find a place that's willing to kind of bring certified therapy dogs to your station, to your department, to your precinct, to your place, to find and sort of outlet to encourage. If it's not talking to an individual, it's having a dog there to just kind of lighten the mood or to provide some support and comfort. I mean, our dogs do really well to just sit and be with somebody who just needs somebody to hold on to. I can't tell you the number of clients that we've had. I know you know this. That they just sit there and cry and hold on to the dog. And the dogs are like, that's what I'm here for. And they just, Rosa will lick your tears,
Especially Rocky. I have clients that say, so is the dog here today? I'm like, yeah, you want him? And yeah, I can bring him in. And so he's a good dog. And the next thing you know, he's petting the dogs and he's talking. And these are big first responders. Exactly. Rocky's on their lap. And
it's a special bonding moment. I think that's exactly what we need. Again, we're not doing things in a traditional sort of movie sort of way. This is out of the box, and we're going to do some different things because we need help.
Right. Because with my clients, we take walks. If they need to pace, I let them pace. They don't have to sit down. There's no rules. That you can eat them. You can eat lunch in my office. Whatever. There's no rules in my office. So
I think and it's not just your first responders, but clients in general come in and be like, "Which dog is here today? Or who's here? Where are they at?" Right? They're screaming down the hallway. Where are they at? And we're like, here they come, and they're marching down the hallway looking for somebody to lick and love on. So. Yeah, I think it's definitely necessary. So then let's talk about this. As we wrap up, guys, we've done a lot to talk about this. This is just the tip of the iceberg for so many issues. I encourage the conversation to keep going at home, in the community, in the stations, but also here to play this forward. What are the available resources now? Where can people go to now? We've talked about Meridian, obviously, we're hosting this. And you mentioned a few, Debbie, right, for firefighters, but for first responders in general. Like, do you know Operation Yellow Tape is in Richmond, is based out of Richmond? I know that Kenny's doing national work, right? So he's not just for Virginia. He's bringing awareness, and he will speak and he will travel. Kenny, I'm putting you out there, so give me a cut. But he will travel to speak on the importance of this subject matter anywhere in the country. So he will help you find help. Those are 2 agencies. What else do you know? Like, what's available?
Right. So there are NA and AA meetings just for first responders, both in hospitals and in churches and in different communities. We don't have a really strong one here yet. I'm working with some people that I think would be great at maybe being a peer mentor, first responder. So, but they do exist, and you can do it online. And then sometimes I think maybe if you don't see the solution, maybe you be the solution.
Yeah, I mean, you tried that. We've talked about Debbie's availability to start a group here for first responders, right? Just from a group. The difference with a group setting, where I know people may not like it, is that it takes one to know one. You're like, yo, we all know each other. We all know where we came from here. We can cut all the BS, cut all the fluff, and start getting ready to what we need to, right? So somebody's got to be willing to be brave enough, and the group is called Brave, but brave enough to take that first step and say, yo, this is good, and I need to do this. So there's group work that can be done for that. And that's more of it, just being able to talk through the psychoeducation, the learning that needs to be done on how to do this everywhere else, right?
Right.
What about, and then there's individual work with you, with other therapists. What should we look for in a therapist? What should a first responder look for in a therapist?
Well, personally, I would ask them, tell me a little bit about your experience of being in a fire station or police station. And if they can't answer that, then to me, maybe that's not the therapist for you. Or tell me a little bit about your training. Now, if they've been working with first responders for 5 or 10 years, hey, maybe they've got something going on that's really great. But when I call and try to determine if someone is first or culturally competent or whatever, I will, ask them questions like, tell me something about a first responder that you never knew about, what surprised you. And if they just, hem and haw, or they can't really discuss it or understand, or what does it mean when a first responder talks about their shift? Like if they don't even basically know that there's a 24-hour or 12-hour, depending on the city, maybe that's not the person for them, but maybe they're right on with a trauma too. I think sometimes you have to go see a therapist and see if there's that connection. They may be culturally competent, maybe the connection's just not being made.
Ask for referrals, ask for recommendations,
definitely.
right? Yeah, hey, you know anybody who works with first responders? Even if you make that as part of the conversation, right? Like, hey, y'all know anybody who's doing any of this work, right? Like, just to be able to get a feel for it, make a mental note. But I think that you guys have said that before. It helped to know it intimately and personally. So I connected you. I opened that door and I told you, go see this person.
Because I think there's 3 of us that are certified as first responder counselors in Virginia.
Wow. In the entire state? Dang, bro, that's crazy.
And that's the special training. Now, hopefully it's grown, or maybe there's more and they just chose not to put their name on the referral list. I don't know. But I'm also a therapist for the IFF Center up in Maryland. So I see patients from there too.
Rick said on here is to count him in for groups. So Rick, I think Debbie's gonna be hitting you up. We'll just share,
Oh, good, yeah.
Reach out to Debbie over here, Rick, and anybody out there that's interested in taking that step, to be a part of a group like that, to take that step to get information out there. I think that we need to work together to spread the word on the need and the importance of this, right? Both active, not active anymore, retired, looking to join into, right? But we need to spread the word. What are your thoughts, Ben? How do you find help out there? What would you look for? What would somebody maybe from the police department look for?
I think it's going to go from some of the same lines we said earlier. I think just finding the accountability, feeling comfortable with being able to share that. And I think we do have to break the culture of keeping it in. That's something that's going to take a while to do. It's one of those things where it's okay to open up and it's okay to share in certain settings, but I think it's an intimidation factor of it being weak. And I think just kind of destroying that. But as far as the resources available, like I've said before, I've been out now for 11 years, so I don't know. It sounds like a lot of good stuff is happening, which is great to hear. But I can't specifically think of a specific source at this time.
But you've spoken a lot to being able to reach out to your faith community, reach out to the churches you're actively involved in. And again, that's a safe space to say, hey, I need help. What can we do? So I think that that's an encouragement that you've lived. Right. That you've shown.
And I think a lot of it is just taking that step of, like, I never would have gone to a church group. I thought it was weak. I didn't want to hear about people's feelings and that kind of thing. And that's just how I still sometimes do that as you're laughing.
Bro, I can remember groups that we did together. You were like,
And it's just, and it's not, I guess the way you're kind of trained is like, when people ask me, how you doing? I'm good. I mean,
I'm good.
Even I'm good. I'm good. So it's
Living the
not,
dream.
right. It's not the kind of, it's not that I'm gonna just, they're going through all this, help me.
Well, and the faith walk looks different, right? Like having seen and gone through some of the things that you have, right? My faith walk is gonna sound real different when I report it out than the little, homeschooled like bubble person. Nothing wrong with them, but they look different and they've been through some different experiences than I have. So you may not like some of the things I say about it, right? You may not like some of the jokes I put. You and I know many of them. We're like, really, bro? Right? Like it's just gonna look different, but that's okay. I think that finding a faith community that is supportive of that,
right,
to let you grow in a place that you can feel accepted, that you can feel wanted and supported.
And I'll say, I mean, you can attest to this. You can learn from everybody. I think that's kind of the setting. Is we
100%.
think that certain people are the only people we can relate with.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I've been in rooms with people that I'm like, man, they're weird. I'm just being honest. But once you start talking to them and hearing them out, they have some insight that they can provide. They have some experience, or they might have a connection somewhere that might help you in life.
That's because that was me you were talking about when you first met me. You're like, man, he's weird. Truth comes out, right? Yo, so listen, we're wrapping up, guys. I'm so appreciative. There's so much more to say. We'll have to have a part 2 or something and more going on. You guys make sure that you share this out in the community, share this podcast, share this information, and we will grow and we will continue to support each other with it. What is your final parting words and thoughts to the community that will be watching this now or later? Anything you guys want to share?
Again, I'm a true believer is do not be your own judge, jury, and executioner. Because the second that we think we have all the answers and we are an independent island is when bad behaviors, suicide, and destruction start to feel like it's a good choice. Reach out and give them our phone number.
Yeah, reach out here to Meridian. I know Debbie will go and she will travel. She will advocate and speak anywhere. Reach out here, Meridian, 757-460-4655 is our number here in Virginia Beach. I'm always down to have a conversation and go somewhere. Me and Debbie take road trips together. We'll take some dogs with us and we'll come speak to whatever community we can. And I think that the duo helps because I'm, again, not one, but I'm sensitive to and appreciative of the work. And so I think that you have both perspectives there.
Definitely, yeah.
So we would love to come out to wherever you are.
And call, just make an appointment.
Yeah.
If
Say,
you're
I
in
need to see
Virginia,
Debbie.
I can legally see you.
That's right. Parting words, thoughts, encouragement.
I think I'll add one thing I want to say is for those out there that are, don't settle. I know there's a lot of them out there that they're trying to think about their future and they're stuck of, this is all I know. Study stuff, look up things, find an interest. And I know there's a lot of resources out there with the departments for education and stuff like that. Like, work on yourself. Don't accept that you're in this certain position and you think about retirement and think of ways to develop your skill set. I've just talked to so many that they feel like they're stuck in a position. They can't get out. And I'm telling you, I was able to do it. A lot of connections, a lot of studying, just learning a new skill set. There's YouTube videos on computer programs. There's TikTok stuff. I mean, there's ways to learn. So I just want to encourage you all to don't get stuck in that rut. Don't think that this is all you can do. And, just fight off that bitterness. That's all I can say. The bitterness will take you down. If you're around people that are constantly complaining and you're in a rough environment as it is, it's not helpful.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good word, Ben. You got support and friends here. I pray that this will be a blessing to somebody out there. I can't thank you enough, Ben, Debbie, for sharing your time, sharing your experiences with us, and your hearts. And so thank you for the work that you guys continue to do in the capacity now, but even your sensitivity to those around you and the brothers and sisters that you fight with. So thank you. And thank you to all of you out there.
Yeah.
Always. We appreciate y'all. Keep fighting, keep doing what y'all do. This is Real People, Real Talk. Peace out, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Good job.
That was good.
Yeah.